The millionaire invited his maid as a joke, but when she arrived like a goddess, everyone stared. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Ethan Carter was a man of wealth, power, and unshakable confidence. At just 32 years old, he had built an empire that many could only dream of. As the CEO of a global tech company, his life was filled with extravagant parties, high-end cars, and luxurious homes. But amid all this wealth, there was one thing he had never taken seriously: his staff. Ethan had always seen his employees as tools to maintain his success, nothing more. That included his maid, Emma. Emma was a simple woman, working diligently every day, ensuring Ethan's mansion was spotless. She lived a life far from the glamour of the high society Ethan moved in. But Emma was no ordinary maid. She had a grace about her, a quiet strength that Ethan never took the time to notice. In fact, he hardly ever paid attention to her, except when he needed something done around the house. One evening, after a particularly boring business dinner, Ethan found himself with a mischievous thought. He was sitting with his friends, joking about how easy it was to impress people with wealth. "You know what would be funny?" he said with a smirk. "Invite Emma to the party as a joke. She'd never fit in, and everyone would be confused as to why she's here." His friends burst into laughter at the thought. It was an easy laugh for them, but Ethan thought it was just a harmless prank. He went to his personal assistant, and with a wink, told her to invite Emma to the upcoming gala, treating it like a grand joke. The idea seemed amusing at the time, but little did he know, it would be a night that would change everything. Emma had no idea about the joke. She was simply told to show up at a gala hosted by her employer. She was hesitant, unsure of what to expect from an event so far removed from her usual world. But, with some encouragement, she decided to attend. The day of the event arrived, and Emma, though nervous, was determined to attend with dignity. She had never been to anything as grand as this before. She spent the afternoon getting ready, picking out a dress that she felt might make her look presentable, even if it wasn't from a designer's collection. When she entered the venue, she was immediately overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the laughter of people dressed in suits and gowns. It was all a far cry from her simple life as a maid. She looked around, feeling out of place. But she walked in with her head held high, trying her best not to let the looks from others make her feel small. Ethan, standing at the center of the room with his friends, spotted her as she entered. For a split second, he froze. He hadn't expected her to actually show up. The plan had been for her to decline the invitation, but here she was, looking different. Not like the woman who cleaned his house, but someone else entirely. The dress she wore was simple, but it fit her beautifully. Her hair, usually tied up in a bun, flowed in soft waves around her shoulders. And her eyes, the same ones he had dismissed countless times, were now shining with a kind of quiet confidence. He couldn't help but stare. Ethan's friends were quick to notice the change in him. "What's going on, Ethan?" one of them asked with a teasing grin. Ethan shook his head, still processing what he saw. "I didn't expect this," he muttered. But he was too proud to admit he had misjudged Emma. As the night went on, Emma tried her best to blend into the background. But no matter where she went, eyes followed her. She felt the whispers of curiosity and judgment all around her. It wasn't long before people began to ask, "Who is she?" They didn't know her name, but they knew she didn't belong here. And yet, there was something about her that made them want to know more. As the evening continued, Ethan found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. He approached her with a glass of wine, his usual confidence slowly slipping away. "Emma, you look different," he said, his voice faltering slightly. Emma turned to him with a smile. "I could say the same about you, Ethan. You didn't expect me to show up, did you?" She could tell from his expression that something had changed in him. He wasn't laughing anymore. The prank he had planned had backfired in a way he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't long before the truth started to sink in for Ethan. This woman, the one he had so easily dismissed, had turned out to be far more than he ever imagined. And as the night unfolded, everyone at the gala couldn't help but stare, not because she didn't belong, but because she was more than they had ever thought possible. As the night went on, Ethan couldn't help but notice Emma more and more. He tried to go about his evening as usual, chatting with his friends and greeting other guests, but his mind kept drifting back to her. The way she moved so gracefully through the crowd, the way her smile lit up the room, and the way her presence seemed to command attention, even though she wasn't trying to. It was a side of her he had never seen before. Emma had always been the quiet, reserved maid in his house, someone he hardly paid attention to except when it was time to give orders. But now, in this elegant setting, she seemed like someone else entirely, someone who belonged here, in this world of wealth and luxury. As much as Ethan tried to ignore it, he couldn't deny that she was fascinating. He hadn't expected this, not in a million years. His friends, too, couldn't seem to take their eyes off her. They whispered among themselves, clearly wondering who she was, why she was there, and how she had managed to look so beautiful in such an unexpected way. But what struck Ethan most was how comfortable she seemed in her own skin. Despite being surrounded by the richest of the rich, she didn't seem out of place. She didn't act like she was trying to fit in, like most people did when they were in a room full of strangers. Instead, she was calm, poised, and almost regal in the way she carried herself. As the evening wore on, Ethan found himself walking toward her. He didn't know what he was going to say, but he couldn't just let the night go on without acknowledging the shift he had noticed in her. As he approached, Emma turned and caught his eye. She smiled, a polite, almost knowing smile, as though she could tell what was going through his mind. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice smooth and composed. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ethan chuckled nervously, trying to regain his usual confidence. "I didn't expect to see you here either." There was a brief moment of silence as they both stood there, looking at each other, neither one sure what to say next. Finally, Ethan spoke up again, his voice a little more sincere this time. "I have to admit, you've surprised me tonight. I didn't think you'd come, let alone show up looking like this." Emma tilted her head slightly, her smile softening. "I didn't think I belonged here either," she replied, her tone thoughtful. "But I figured I might as well give it a try. Everyone deserves a chance to step outside of their comfort zone." Ethan couldn't help but feel a shift in his perspective. He had always seen Emma as just a maid, someone beneath him, someone he could order around without thinking twice. But now, as he stood in front of her, he realized just how wrong he had been. There was so much more to her than he had ever allowed himself to see. He was beginning to understand that she wasn't just some hired help. She was a woman with her own story, her own strength, and her own dignity. But he wasn't the only one who had been surprised by her presence. As the evening progressed, whispers about Emma continued to spread throughout the room. Guests who had initially looked down on her were now intrigued by her quiet elegance. Some of the women were even trying to figure out where she had bought her dress, thinking it might be from some high-end boutique. Meanwhile, the men couldn't help but admire her beauty and the way she carried herself with such grace. Even the staff members who had been hesitant to serve her earlier in the evening were now looking at her with newfound respect. Emma, however, remained unaffected by the attention. She continued to move through the crowd with a calm composure, talking to people politely, but never letting herself get drawn into the superficiality of the event. She wasn't here for the approval of others. She was here because she had been invited, and she was going to make the most of it. As the night drew to a close, Ethan found himself standing by the door, watching Emma as she said her goodbyes. He had never felt this way before, not about anyone. There was something about her that intrigued him, something about the way she didn't need to rely on his wealth or status to feel important. She was confident in her own right, and it was something that both humbled and inspired him. He knew he had made a mistake by underestimating her all these years. But now, it was too late to take back what had been said and done. He could only hope that this night, this surprising turn of events, would open his eyes to who Emma really was. As Emma stepped into her car and drove off into the night, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. He didn't know where this feeling was coming from, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let her slip away without trying to make things right. This was just the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. The next morning, Ethan couldn't shake the images from the gala out of his head. He found himself pacing around his office, his thoughts consumed with Emma. He had never expected that one invitation would change his entire perspective. The way she had carried herself, the quiet confidence that had emanated from her, and the respect she commanded, all without saying a word, had left a lasting impression on him. He couldn't stop thinking about how wrong he had been to underestimate her. The truth hit him hard. Emma was not the simple maid he had assumed. She was far more than that. Ethan's mind raced with the realization that he might have missed the opportunity to get to know someone extraordinary, someone who might have just taught him more about life than any business deal ever could. But he wasn't about to let it end there. He knew he had to make things right, and he was determined to find a way to do so. The problem was, he didn't know where to start. Ethan had always been the type to control everything around him, but with Emma, he had no control. He wasn't sure if it was his guilt, his curiosity, or his growing attraction to her that made him so eager to fix his mistake, but he knew that he couldn't just let her slip away without at least trying. So he picked up his phone and called his assistant, Marissa. "I need to see Emma," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. "Find out where she is, and get me an appointment with her. I'll leave everything else to you." Marissa, who had worked for him for years, didn't question the request. "Understood," she replied, her tone businesslike. Ethan hung up the phone and sat back in his chair. The next few hours felt like an eternity as he waited for Marissa's call. When his phone finally rang, his heart skipped a beat. "She's agreed to meet you," Marissa said, "at the cafe on 5th and Elm. Tomorrow afternoon at 2. Ethan didn't waste any time. He knew that this meeting had to count. The next day, he arrived at the cafe early, his mind running over the words he would say. What do you even say to someone like Emma? He wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability. For the first time in a long time, he felt unsure of himself. When Emma walked in, she was dressed simply but beautifully, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. Ethan stood as soon as he saw her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Please, don't get up," she said, her voice warm but guarded. She took a seat across from him, her eyes meeting his. There was a long silence before either of them spoke. Ethan wasn't sure how to begin, but Emma broke the silence first. "I wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting," she said, her tone calm but slightly distant. "You've always kept your distance from me, Ethan. I'm curious to know why the sudden change." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "You're right," he said slowly. "I've treated you unfairly. I've underestimated you for so long, and I was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I regret how I've treated you. You're not just my maid, Emma. You're much more than that." Emma listened intently, her expression unreadable. "Why the change of heart?" she asked, still cautious but clearly interested. Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. "After last night, after seeing you at the gala, I realized just how wrong I've been. You were nothing like what I imagined. You were incredible. You walked into that room and owned it without saying a word. I've never seen someone carry themselves the way you do." Emma looked away for a moment, clearly processing his words. When she looked back at him, there was a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "I didn't come to the gala to impress anyone, Ethan," she said quietly. "I was just being myself. It's not about the dress or the way I look. It's about who I am on the inside. I'm more than just the person you've seen cleaning your house. I've got my own dreams, my own goals, and I don't need your approval to feel validated." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He had taken her for granted for so long, assuming she was nothing more than an employee, someone who was there to serve him. But now, in this moment, he saw her as a person, a strong and independent woman who deserved far more than he had ever given her credit for. "I know," he said softly. "I've never treated you the way you deserve, and I want to change that. I don't want to just be the boss who pays you to clean. I want to get to know you, Emma. I want to understand who you are and what you want out of life." Emma studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "Why now?" she asked. "What's changed? Why the sudden interest?" Ethan sighed, feeling the weight of his own emotions. "I've been blind, Emma. I've been so focused on work and my wealth that I've missed the most important things in life. And now, I realize I don't want to miss out on knowing you." Emma remained quiet for a moment, her gaze softening. "I appreciate your honesty, Ethan, but I don't know if I can just forgive and forget everything that's happened. It's not that easy." Ethan nodded, understanding. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want the chance to prove that I'm not the same person I was before. I want to earn your respect, not just your forgiveness." Emma looked at him for a long time before finally speaking. "I'll give you a chance, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. But it's going to take time. I'm not going to trust you overnight, and I need you to understand that. Ethan's heart lifted, grateful for the opportunity to start fresh. I understand, he said with a smile. And I'll do whatever it takes. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them feeling the weight of the conversation. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt hopeful. This was the beginning of something new, something real, and he was willing to fight for it. The next few days were a whirlwind for Ethan. He couldn't stop thinking about Emma, and every time he saw her, there was a nagging feeling in his chest, a mixture of guilt, admiration, and a sense of urgency to make things right. Their conversation at the cafe had been a turning point for him. He had finally admitted his mistakes and shown her that he wanted to change, but he knew actions spoke louder than words. Ethan understood that earning Emma's trust wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to happen overnight. Still, he was determined to prove himself. Emma, on the other hand, was cautious. She appreciated Ethan's honesty, but she wasn't about to jump into anything just because he had said the right things. It wasn't just about him proving he had changed. It was about her finding her own path in all of this. She had worked hard her entire life to build her own identity, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially Ethan, define who she was. She wasn't some prize to be won. She had made that mistake before in relationships, and she wasn't about to make it again. Emma remained professional with Ethan at work, but she kept their interactions strictly business. She couldn't afford to let herself get too involved, not yet. Ethan respected her boundaries, but it didn't stop him from feeling a growing desire to get closer to her. He found himself thinking about her constantly, noticing the way she carried herself, the quiet strength she had, and the way she seemed so unbothered by the wealth and status that had always been a part of his life. It was refreshing, and it made him want to learn more about her dreams, her passions, and what made her tick. As the days passed, Ethan made small gestures to show Emma that he was sincere. He didn't bombard her with grand gestures or lavish gifts. Instead, he showed up with a coffee from her favorite cafe or a book he thought she might enjoy. He was careful not to overwhelm her, but he wanted to show her that he cared about more than just himself. One afternoon, after work, Ethan invited Emma to join him for a walk in the park near his home. It was a quiet, peaceful place, and he thought it would be the perfect opportunity to talk more. At first, Emma hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take that step. But after a moment, she agreed, and they walked side by side, the sun beginning to set behind the trees. "It's beautiful here," Emma said, breaking the silence. "I never realized how much I needed a place like this." Ethan smiled. "It's one of my favorite spots. It's where I come when I need to think." He glanced at her, noticing how relaxed she seemed, how the tension she had carried earlier was beginning to ease. It made him feel good to see her like this, not so guarded. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day," Ethan continued, "about earning your respect. I know it's going to take time, but I want you to know that I'm serious about making things right. I'm not just doing this because I feel guilty. I'm doing it because I want to be a better person, and I want to be someone you can trust." Emma looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate that, Ethan, but I'm not going to pretend that everything can just be fixed with a few nice words. You've got a lot of work to do, and I'm not going to make it easy for you, but I'm willing to give you a chance." Ethan felt a surge of hope, but he knew better than to get too ahead of himself. This was just the beginning. "I understand," he said, "and I'll do whatever it takes." They walked for a while longer, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, they stopped by a bench, and Emma sat down, her eyes on the horizon. Ethan joined her, sitting a little closer this time, but still respecting the space between them. "You've changed my perspective on a lot of things," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "Before, I always thought I had to have everything figured out. But now, I'm not so sure. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want you to be a part of it." Emma turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. There was a vulnerability there that he hadn't noticed before. It made her more real to him, more human. "You're still figuring things out, aren't you?" she asked softly. "I think we both are," Ethan replied with a small smile. "But that's okay, right?" Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood up, brushing off the seat of her pants. "I think we both need some time to figure things out. I don't want to rush anything, Ethan." Ethan stood as well, nodding. "I agree. We'll take it one step at a time." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them comfortable, not awkward. It wasn't the resolution of everything, but it was a step forward. A small step, but one that felt like progress. As they walked back toward the entrance of the park, Ethan felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in a long time. Maybe it was because for the first time in a while, he wasn't trying to control everything. Maybe it was because he had opened up to someone he had once dismissed, and now, he was beginning to see the world in a new light. Whatever it was, Ethan knew that this was just the beginning of something important. He didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he was excited to find out. The following weeks were filled with small but significant changes. Ethan and Emma had fallen into a rhythm of polite interactions, and although neither of them spoke about the tension that had once existed, it was clear to both that something had shifted. Emma was still cautious, but she had begun to open up more around him. Their interactions were no longer just formal exchanges. They shared more conversations, often about things beyond work. Ethan found himself looking forward to these moments. He had always been so focused on his business, on his career, that he had never stopped to truly connect with the people around him. Emma was different. She didn't ask for anything from him, didn't try to impress him. She was just herself, and for some reason, that made her even more intriguing to him. She had no interest in his wealth or status. Instead, she was a woman who had worked hard for everything she had, and that was something he respected. Emma, too, was finding herself looking forward to their time together. She had started to see a side of Ethan she hadn't known existed. He was more than just the arrogant businessman she had initially thought him to be. Sure, he was still learning, but there was something genuine about the way he was trying to change, to be better. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she could trust him, even if just a little. One day, Ethan invited her to lunch at a small, cozy cafe he knew she liked. It was the kind of place where you didn't feel rushed, where the food was simple but delicious, and where you could sit and talk without being interrupted. Emma was hesitant at first. She had gotten used to the boundaries between them, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to cross them. But something inside her told her that this was different. So she agreed. When she arrived at the cafe, Ethan was already there, waiting for her. He stood up as she walked in, his smile warm but not overbearing. "I'm glad you could make it," he said, pulling out a chair for her. Emma smiled back, sitting down. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she admitted, "but I thought it might be nice." They both sat there for a moment, the air between them comfortable, with no rush to say anything. It felt like the first time they were really seeing each other for who they truly were. As they ordered their food, they chatted casually about their day, about things that didn't matter much but somehow felt significant in the moment. Ethan listened to Emma as she talked about her hobbies and interests, things she had never shared before, and he was surprised by how much he enjoyed hearing her speak with such passion. It was clear that she had a life beyond the walls of his mansion, and he found himself wanting to know more about it. For Emma, it was the first time she realized how much she had been keeping to herself. She had always been so careful, so guarded, and now, sitting here with Ethan, she felt like maybe it was okay to let go of some of that. "I've never really had the chance to do much for myself," she said, her voice soft. "When you work so much, it's hard to find time for things you enjoy. But I love painting. It's always been my escape." Ethan was intrigued. He had never known this about her. "Painting?" he asked. "That's amazing. What do you like to paint?" Emma smiled, a small, thoughtful smile. "Anything, really. But I especially love landscapes. There's something about nature that makes me feel at peace." Ethan nodded, taking it all in. "I'd love to see some of your work someday," he said genuinely. Emma was taken aback. She hadn't expected that. She had never considered showing her work to anyone outside of her own private space. But Ethan's sincerity made her feel like maybe it was something worth sharing. "Maybe," she said, her voice quieter. As their lunch continued, they spoke more freely, and it was the most comfortable they had felt with each other in a long time. Ethan realized that his attraction to Emma wasn't just about her looks or her quiet confidence. It was the way she made him feel more grounded, more aware of the world beyond his work. She had a way of making him slow down, of helping him see the things that really mattered. And Emma, for her part, found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. It wasn't just Ethan's wealth or his status that drew her in. It was his genuine effort to understand her, to see her as a person and not just as a maid. It was refreshing to be treated with such respect, with such kindness. As the afternoon came to a close, they both stood to leave, and Ethan paid for their meal, as he always did. Emma tried to protest, but he simply smiled and shook his head. It's the least I can do, he said. Besides, I owe you a lot more than that. They walked out of the cafe together, the sun setting behind them. It was a moment of quiet connection, one that neither of them had expected but both of them had needed. As they parted ways, Ethan felt a sense of calm wash over him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. And Emma, walking away with a small smile on her face, felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change for the better. The days that followed felt different for both Ethan and Emma. There was a shift in their dynamic, an unspoken understanding that they were no longer bound by the strict lines of employer and employee. Slowly, they began to find themselves in more personal, meaningful conversations. Emma still kept a part of herself guarded, but it was becoming harder for her to deny the growing connection she felt with Ethan. He was showing a side of himself that she had never expected, one that was kind, genuine, and, for the first time, vulnerable. Ethan, on the other hand, felt more at peace with himself than he had in years. For once, he wasn't consumed by his empire or the pressures of his wealth. His mind often wandered to Emma, not as a maid but as a woman with her own life, dreams, and desires. He was captivated by the way she carried herself with such grace, the way she didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. But just when Ethan thought things were moving in the right direction, an unexpected complication arose. Claire, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, returned to town. She had been away for a while, working abroad, but she had just come back to attend a charity gala Ethan was hosting. Claire was everything Ethan once thought he wanted, polished, confident, and, in many ways, a reflection of the life he had built. She was also the one person who still held a strong hold on his family's approval. The moment Claire walked into the room at Ethan's office, a sense of tension filled the air. She was as beautiful and poised as ever, her eyes quickly scanning the room until they landed on Ethan. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "I didn't expect to see you here today." Ethan stood up, surprised by her sudden appearance. "Claire, it's been a while," he said, trying to hide the unease creeping up his spine. "How's everything?" Claire smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everything's fine. Just got back from a long trip." She paused, her gaze flicking to the door. "I've been meaning to catch up with you. There's something I need to discuss, and I think it's best if we do it now." Ethan nodded, motioning for her to sit. As Claire took a seat, Ethan's mind raced. He hadn't expected this, not after everything that had happened between them. But what Claire said next caught him completely off guard. "Ethan," she began, leaning forward slightly. "I know we've been through a lot, but I want to try again. I think we're meant to be together." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was the last thing he had expected from Claire. The woman who had been a constant presence in his life, the one he had once thought he would marry, was now asking him to start over. He didn't know how to respond. But before he could say anything, Claire added, "You've always been so focused on your business, Ethan. And I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with that woman, the one you hired to clean your house." Ethan stiffened at her words. His instincts immediately told him to defend Emma, but he didn't. He stayed silent, unsure of what to say. Claire seemed to take his silence as an opening. "I'm just saying, Ethan," she continued. "I know you think you're helping her, but people like her don't belong in our world. You're better off with someone who understands your lifestyle, someone who knows what it's like to live in this world." The words stung more than Ethan was willing to admit. Claire had always been the type to belittle others who didn't fit into her idea of success. But hearing her say it about Emma, about the woman he had started to care for, made his blood boil. "Claire, that's not fair," Ethan said, his voice firm. "You don't know Emma. And she's not just someone I'm helping. She's someone I respect." Claire's eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure. "If you say so," she replied, her tone icy. "But don't come crying to me when you realize you've made a mistake. I know you, Ethan. You'll get bored. You always do." Ethan clenched his fists under the table. He didn't want to let Claire's words get to him, but they did. She had always had a way of making him doubt himself, of making him feel like he had to fit into the mold she created. But something inside of him had changed. He wasn't the same man he had been when they were together. And he wasn't going to let anyone tell him what was right for him. Not anymore. "I'm not going to let you talk about Emma that way," he said, standing up. "I don't care what you think. I've made my choices, and I'm going to live with them." If you can't respect that, then maybe it's time for us to move on for good. Claire looked taken aback by his sudden outburst, but she quickly regained her composure. Fine, she said coolly. Do whatever you want, Ethan. But don't say I didn't warn you. With that, she stood up and walked out, leaving Ethan alone in his office, his thoughts swirling. As he sat back down, his mind returned to Emma. He realized that this was the moment of truth. He couldn't let anyone, not even Claire, dictate his choices. He knew what he wanted now, and he wasn't going to back down. He needed to talk to Emma, to make it clear that he was serious about her. He couldn't let the past hold him back any longer. He stood up, grabbing his coat, and heading out the door. He knew where he needed to go next. As he made his way to Emma's apartment, Ethan felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was the next step in their journey. And this time, he wasn't going to let anything stop him. After leaving his office, Ethan headed straight to Emma's apartment. He had a plan in mind, a conversation he needed to have, and there was no turning back now. The drive across the city felt long, and his mind raced as he reflected on everything that had happened so far. The conversation with Claire still stung, but it also reinforced something important. He had made his decision, and now it was time to stand by it. As the car rolled to a stop outside Emma's building, Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that had taken hold of him. He had spent so much time building his empire, navigating his world of wealth and business, that he had forgotten what it felt like to fight for something that mattered more than money. But this, what he felt for Emma, mattered more than anything else. He had to be honest with her, even if it meant risking everything. He stepped out of the car and walked up the steps to her apartment. His hand hovered over the doorbell for a moment before he rang it. A few moments later, Emma appeared at the door, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Ethan, she asked, her voice soft. What are you doing here? Ethan smiled, but there was a hint of tension in his expression. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice steady but earnest. Emma hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let him in. As he entered, Ethan felt the familiar warmth of her home surround him. It was a far cry from the cold, polished walls of his mansion, but there was something comforting about it. Emma's space felt real, lived in, and it made him feel more grounded, as if for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. What's going on, Ethan? Emma asked, leading him to the small living room. She gestured for him to sit on the couch, and she took a seat across from him. Ethan took a deep breath before speaking. I know I've made mistakes, he began, looking directly into her eyes. I know I've hurt you, and I've taken you for granted. But I need you to understand something. What happened with Claire, it made me realize that I don't want that life anymore. I don't want to go back to the person I was, the person who was always driven by status, by wealth, by what others thought of me. I want to be someone different, someone better. And I want that someone to be with you. Emma listened quietly, her expression unreadable. Ethan continued, feeling his heart race with every word. I've spent so much time thinking about what I want, about what I've built, but I never stopped to think about what really matters. And now that I've met you, I realize that the way I've been living, chasing success, at any cost, it's not enough. It doesn't compare to what I feel when I'm with you. Emma's gaze softened slightly, but she remained quiet. Ethan's hands trembled as he spoke, but he didn't look away. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or to trust me completely, but I'm asking for a chance. A chance to show you that I'm serious about changing. I want to build something real, something that doesn't just exist because of my name or my money. I want to build it with you, Emma. The words hung in the air between them, and Ethan held his breath, waiting for her response. Emma sat still, her gaze thoughtful. Ethan had never seen her so quiet, so introspective. It made him nervous. He had no idea what she was thinking, but he knew that whatever it was important. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Ethan, I appreciate your honesty, she said. But this isn't just about what you want. It's about what I need too. I've spent so much time in my life keeping things to myself, protecting myself, and I've learned that trust is not something that comes easily. I've been hurt before, and I can't just forget about that. Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I know, he said softly, and I'm not asking you to forget. I just want to prove to you that I'm someone worth trusting, that I'm someone who sees you, not just the person who works for me, but the person you are. You're not just someone I admire, Emma. You're someone I respect, and I want to be worthy of that respect. Emma looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Ethan could feel the tension in the room, but there was something else too, a glimmer of hope, a possibility of something more. Finally, she spoke again. "I'm not going to lie to you, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "I'm still not sure if I can trust you, but I'm willing to give you a chance. Not because you're asking for it, but because you've shown me something I didn't think was possible. You've shown me that you're willing to change. And maybe that's enough to start with." Ethan felt a rush of relief flood over him. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "I won't let you down, Emma. I promise." She nodded, her gaze softening. "We'll see. But for now, let's take it one step at a time." They sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation settling between them. Ethan knew there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. And as they talked for the rest of the evening, the air between them felt lighter, more open. Ethan couldn't help but feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. As the weeks passed, Ethan and Emma began to navigate their new relationship. It was a delicate dance, one of building trust and moving at a pace that felt right for both of them. Ethan had made it clear that he was committed to showing Emma that he had changed, that he was no longer the man who had overlooked her or taken her for granted. And Emma, while still cautious, had allowed herself to open up a little more. She appreciated Ethan's efforts, but a part of her remained hesitant. She had learned the hard way not to place her trust in people too quickly, especially not in someone like him. The line between their professional relationship and personal feelings was still a little blurred, but they were finding a way to make it work. For the first time, Ethan found himself balancing the weight of his company with the newfound importance of his personal life. His friends, of course, noticed the change. They had always seen him as the guy who was driven solely by success, the one who always prioritized business over everything else. But now, when they would meet for dinner or drinks, he would often talk about Emma, about how he was trying to make amends for the way he had treated her in the past. "You know, Ethan, we've never seen you like this," one of his friends remarked during one of their gatherings. "You're actually talking about someone other than your work. What's going on with you?" Ethan smiled, a little self-conscious but grateful for their honesty. "I guess I've been so focused on my career for so long that I forgot there's more to life. I met someone who's teaching me that." His friend raised an eyebrow. "Someone? Is it serious?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, considering his answer. "It's getting there. I'm not rushing anything, but, yeah, it's definitely different." The conversation shifted, but Ethan's mind remained on Emma. The changes in him were becoming more apparent, and although it wasn't always easy to embrace vulnerability, he felt better for it. Meanwhile, Emma was adjusting to the changes in her own way. She had been careful with her heart, but she couldn't ignore the fact that Ethan had become someone she looked forward to seeing, someone she was starting to trust. Their conversations had grown more personal, more comfortable. He had even shared more about his childhood, about how his parents had pushed him to achieve from a young age, how his whole life had been about meeting expectations. It was hard for Emma to imagine that version of him, the young boy who had to prove himself constantly. But hearing him talk about it, she began to understand why he had been so driven. In turn, Emma had started to let Ethan into parts of her life she had kept hidden for so long. She told him about her love of painting, about the struggles she had faced growing up, and about the dreams she had put on hold for so long in order to take care of others. She had never told anyone about the sacrifices she had made, not even her closest friends. And she definitely hadn't told Ethan. But with him, something felt different. She realized she wanted to share more, to let him see the real her. They were slowly building a life together, piece by piece. However, even as their connection deepened, complications started to arise. Ethan's family, particularly his mother, had started to take notice of the change in him. They had always been proud of Ethan's achievements, but now they were beginning to question his newfound focus on personal growth rather than business. One evening, during a family dinner, his mother pulled him aside. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with that maid of yours. Are you sure this is a good idea?" Ethan felt a pang of frustration but kept his composure. "Mom, she's not just my maid. Her name is Emma, and I care about her. I've told you before, I'm not just living for the business anymore." His mother sighed, her expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. You've worked so hard to get where you are, Ethan. This isn't what we envisioned for you. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he tried to keep his voice calm. I'm still the same person. I'm just trying to be better, to be more than just the workaholic I used to be. Emma is part of that. She's someone who's taught me a lot about myself. His mother didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned away and looked out the window, as if gathering her thoughts. I just don't want you to make a mistake, she said finally. People like her, they don't understand the world you live in. It's complicated, Ethan. Ethan stood up, feeling the weight of his mother's words pressing down on him. I understand, but I think I know what's best for me now. I've learned that it's not about the money or the status. It's about who I am and who I want to be with. His mother didn't answer, and the conversation ended there. Ethan knew this was just the beginning. His family's disapproval was something he had always faced, but now it felt different. He wasn't going to let it stop him. He was determined to make things work with Emma, no matter what. Later that week, Ethan invited Emma to a quiet dinner at a new restaurant he had discovered. It was a small, intimate place, with warm lighting and soft music playing in the background. As they sat down and ordered their meals, Ethan took a moment to look at Emma, really look at her. I know things aren't perfect, and we've got a long way to go, he said softly. But I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad we're in this together. Emma smiled, her eyes warm. Me too, Ethan. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm willing to find out with you. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he had everything he needed. Not because of his success or his wealth, but because of Emma, because of the chance they had to build something real together. As time passed, Ethan and Emma continued to grow closer, navigating their relationship with care and patience. The trust they had built was fragile, but it was real, and for the first time. In Ethan's life, he wasn't trying to force anything to happen. He was learning to take things slow, to appreciate the moments that had once been lost in his pursuit of success. Emma, on the other hand, was learning to trust again. She had been hurt in the past, and the walls she had built around herself were not so easily torn down. But with Ethan, she felt something different, a kind of stability she hadn't known in a long time. She could see the sincerity in his eyes when he spoke to her, and it gave her hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could build something meaningful. They spent more time together outside of work, getting to know each other beyond their professional roles. Ethan took Emma to the art gallery one afternoon, eager to see her eyes light up as she talked about the paintings. He had never been particularly interested in art, but with Emma, everything felt different. Her passion for the things she loved was contagious, and it made him want to learn more. As they walked through the exhibits, Emma explained the significance of each piece. She spoke about the brushstrokes, the colors, the emotions behind each painting. Ethan listened intently, completely captivated by the way she saw the world. It was a side of her he had never known, and it only made him admire her more. You know, he said as they sat down in front of a large landscape painting. I never really paid attention to art before, but I can see why you love it. There's so much depth to it. Emma smiled, her eyes softening. It's the one place where I feel free, she said quietly. It's where I can express everything I've been holding in. I've never really shared it with anyone before. Ethan's heart swelled at her words. He had known there was more to Emma than met the eye, but hearing her speak so openly about her passions made him realize just how much he still had to learn about her. He wanted to be the person she could turn to, the person who would support her dreams, just as she had supported his. That evening, after the gallery, they took a walk through the city. The streets were quiet, the only sound coming from their footsteps and the occasional hum of passing cars. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt like a turning point in their relationship. Ethan knew that he had a lot of work ahead of him, that building something real with Emma wasn't going to be easy. But in this moment, walking beside her, he felt like everything was possible. He reached out and gently took her hand in his. Emma looked at him, surprised by the gesture, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand, her fingers lacing with his. They continued walking in silence, both of them lost in the connection they shared. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the promises they made to each other. It was about the small, everyday moments, the quiet walks, the conversations, the way they could be themselves with each other without the weight of expectations hanging over them. The next few days were a test for both of them. Ethan's family continued to voice their concerns, especially his mother, who didn't believe Emma was the right person for him. She made it clear that she didn't approve of the relationship, and Ethan found himself torn between his loyalty to his family and his growing feelings for Emma. He knew that he couldn't live his life for his family's approval anymore. He had spent so many years trying to meet their expectations, but it had come at the cost of his own happiness. And now, he wasn't willing to sacrifice his relationship with Emma for their sake. One afternoon, as Ethan and Emma sat in his office discussing business matters, his mother called. He glanced at his phone and saw her name on the screen. He hesitated before answering, knowing the conversation was going to be difficult. "Ethan," his mother's voice came through, sharp and filled with concern. "I've been hearing things. I know you're spending time with that woman, but I really think you're making a mistake." Ethan took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the phone. "Mom, I've told you before, Emma is not just someone I'm spending time with. She's someone I care about, and I'm not going to apologize for that." His mother's tone softened, but her words still carried weight. "Ethan, I just want what's best for you. You've worked so hard to get to where you are. Don't let her distract you from your goals." Ethan paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I know what I want, Mom, and I'm not going to let anyone tell me what that is anymore." His mother didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, the silence between them felt heavy. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. "I just want you to be happy, Ethan, but I don't think you'll find that with her." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "I'll find my happiness, Mom, and I'll do it on my terms." With that, he hung up the phone, his heart racing. He felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness. He had always wanted his family's approval, but now he realized that he couldn't let their disapproval dictate his life. He had to make his own choices, even if it meant disappointing them. Emma, who had been listening quietly, looked at him with a mixture of concern and understanding. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, though his expression was a mixture of frustration and sadness. "I'm fine. Just had to make a hard decision. That's all." Emma reached across the desk and took his hand, offering him silent support. "I'm here for you," she said, her voice filled with warmth. In that moment, Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He knew that whatever happened next, he wasn't alone. He had Emma by his side, and that was all that mattered. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet, but significant shifts in Ethan and Emma's relationship. They had weathered the storm of family expectations, and now, they were moving forward, carving out their own path. Ethan felt a new sense of freedom, one that didn't come from his wealth or his company, but from the choices he had made, and the woman by his side. Emma, too, felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. The quiet peace of being accepted for who she was. No longer just the maid in Ethan's mansion, she had become an equal, someone whose opinions and dreams mattered just as much as his own. However, life wasn't without its challenges. Ethan's business continued to demand much of his attention. The pressure was constant, and he often found himself up late at his desk, trying to stay ahead of the competition, making decisions that affected not only his future but the future of his employees. There were days when the weight of it all felt overwhelming, and Ethan found himself frustrated by the fact that, even with all his success, he still couldn't seem to balance his professional and personal life. Emma noticed it, of course. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the fatigue in his eyes. But she also understood. She knew how it felt to give everything to a goal and lose sight of everything else. It was something they had in common. She wanted to be supportive, but she didn't want to smother him either. They talked about it one evening after dinner, as they sat on the couch in his apartment. Emma had made dinner that night, a simple meal, but one that had taken her some time to prepare. She was proud of it, but Ethan hardly seemed to notice. "Ethan," she said gently, her voice soft, "I can see you're working hard, but you can't keep pushing yourself like this." Ethan looked up, startled. "I'm fine," he said, but the exhaustion in his voice betrayed him. "I'm just trying to make sure everything runs smoothly." Emma placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "I know you're trying to fix everything, but you can't do it alone. You don't have to." Ethan's heart ached a little at her words. He had always been the one to carry the burden, the one to solve problems and make things right. But he realized, in that moment, that he didn't have to do everything on his own anymore. Emma was there for him, and that meant something. "I don't want to let you down," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've always been so focused on my work that I sometimes forget about everything else. And I know that's not fair to you. Emma smiled softly, her eyes full of understanding. You're not letting me down, she said. I'm here because I believe in us, in what we're building together. But you need to take care of yourself too, Ethan. I can't help you if you don't help yourself. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. I know. I've been so wrapped up in my own head. I haven't been the partner I should be. I'm sorry. Emma's expression softened. You don't have to apologize. Just, let me help you, okay? Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It was strange, but comforting, to know that he didn't have to bear everything alone. As the night wore on, they sat together in silence, the kind of quiet that spoke volumes. Ethan's mind wandered, but this time, it wasn't consumed with business or pressure. He was thinking about the future, about a future with Emma, one where they supported each other, not just in moments of joy, but in times of hardship as well. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He had been working on a new business venture, one that had consumed much of his time and energy, but he realized that it was time to delegate more. He couldn't keep doing everything himself, and he didn't want to. He had a team for that. And he had Emma, too. He sent a message to his assistant, Marissa, telling her to set up a meeting with the team to discuss some changes to the company structure. He knew it would take some time to put the right people in place, but it was a step toward finding a better balance. Later that day, after his meeting with Marissa, Ethan went home early, surprising Emma. He brought dinner from the cafe they had visited a few weeks ago, the same cafe where they had first had that conversation about taking things slow. Emma greeted him with a surprised smile. What's all this? She asked, her eyes twinkling. Ethan grinned. Dinner. I thought we could relax tonight. They sat down to eat, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't think about work. He didn't think about the pressure or the expectations. He just focused on the moment, on the woman sitting across from him. They talked about everything and nothing, about their favorite books, their childhoods, the little things that made their lives their own. As the evening came to a close, Emma leaned back in her chair, smiling. This was nice, she said, her voice soft. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It was, he agreed. I think I need to do this more often. Spend time with you, not just the business. Emma's smile widened, her heart feeling light. I'm glad you're realizing that, she said, squeezing his hand. You're not alone in this, Ethan. We're in it together. Ethan looked into her eyes, feeling something shift. Inside him, for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to share his life with someone. He wasn't just the businessman or the son trying to meet his family's expectations. He was Ethan, the man who had fallen for Emma, and that was enough. As the evening ended, they sat together, their hearts in sync, knowing that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them side by side. As the weeks unfolded, Ethan and Emma's bond continued to grow. Each passing day seemed to reinforce what they had started together, a partnership that was slowly evolving into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. Ethan, who had once been consumed by his business, found himself prioritizing his time with Emma more than anything else. For the first time, he wasn't chasing success, he was chasing something more meaningful. He still worked hard, of course, but he had learned to delegate more, to trust his team, and to focus on building something that wasn't just about money or status. Emma had come to see this change in him, and it was what kept her hopeful. She knew that trust would take time, but she also recognized that Ethan was trying. He was genuinely trying to be a better man, not just for himself, but for her too. For the first time in her life, she was allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something that lasted. They spent weekends together, exploring the city, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Whether it was walking through a park, visiting a small cafe, or simply sitting together at home, their connection deepened. For Ethan, it was a revelation. He had always been so focused on achieving external success, but with Emma, he realized that true happiness didn't come from accolades or achievements. It came from being present, from sharing quiet moments with someone who cared for you, not because of what you had, but because of who you were. One weekend, as they sat on the balcony of Ethan's apartment, enjoying a glass of wine, Emma turned to him. Ethan, she said, her voice thoughtful, I've been thinking a lot about the future. Ethan looked at her, sensing the weight of her words. What about the future? He asked gently. She took a deep breath, looking out at the city skyline. I think we've both been so focused on the present, on getting to know each other, that we haven't really talked about where we're going. Ethan paused, processing her words. I know we've been taking things one step at a time, but if I'm being honest, I'm ready for more, he said, his voice steady. Emma met his gaze, her eyes searching his face. More? What do you mean? Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with the feeling that had been growing inside him for weeks. I mean, I want to be with you. Not just now, but for the long haul. I want us to build a life together, a future. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to do the work. I'm ready to make this my priority. Our relationship, our future. And I want you to be a part of that. Emma's heart fluttered at his words. She hadn't expected this, not so soon. But there was something in his eyes, something she had never seen before, that told her he was serious. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of a future with him. I've never thought that far ahead, she admitted softly. I've always kept things close to the chest, not wanting to set myself up for disappointment. But I think I'm starting to see a future too. A future with you. Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. I don't want to rush anything. I want us to go at our own pace, but I also want you to know that I'm all in. I'm not going anywhere. Emma squeezed his hand, a smile spreading across her face. I believe you, Ethan, and I'm willing to see where this goes. They sat together in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city fading into the background. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt truly at peace. She had always been cautious, always protecting her heart, but now she was ready to take the leap. With Ethan, she felt like she had finally found someone who understood her, who saw her for who she was, not for what she could offer. As the days went by, their relationship deepened further. They spent more time with each other's families and friends, slowly blending their worlds together. Ethan's family, particularly his mother, had not completely come around to the idea of Emma, but Ethan stood firm. He knew what he wanted, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even his family, dictate his choices. Emma, too, had her own fears, but she was learning to trust, to let go of the insecurities that had held her back for so long. She realized that her past didn't define her, and with Ethan, she felt like she could finally be the person she had always wanted to be. One evening, as they walked through the park near Ethan's apartment, Ethan stopped and turned to Emma. I've been thinking, he began, his voice a little hesitant. About us, about the future. I know it's still early, but I want to ask you something important. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What is it? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Ethan smiled softly, reaching into his pocket. I know we've been taking things slow, but I want you to know that I'm in this for the long run. And I was wondering, would you consider moving in with me? Emma's eyes widened in surprise. Move in, she repeated, the idea taking a moment to sink in. Ethan nodded. I know it's a big step, but I think we're ready for it. I want us to build a life together, and that means sharing everything. Our space, our time, our future. What do you think? Emma looked at him, her heart racing. It wasn't the question she had expected, but somehow, it felt right. After a long pause, she smiled, her answer clear. Yes, I think I'm ready for that too. The moment was filled with a quiet joy, a realization that they were both willing to take the next step. Ethan leaned in and kissed her gently, the kiss carrying the promise of the future they were about to build together. As they walked back to his apartment, hand in hand, they both knew that their journey was just beginning, and whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. The next few months brought about a new chapter in Ethan and Emma's relationship. The decision to move in together, although initially overwhelming, quickly became a source of joy for both of them. They found a new sense of normalcy in their shared life, a rhythm that blended both their worlds. Emma had packed up her apartment and moved into Ethan's, and while the transition was smooth, it was also filled with the small adjustments that come when two people's lives merge. Ethan, for all his success in business, had never been the type to pay much attention to domestic details. He was used to having everything taken care of for him, whether it was his meals, his laundry, or the upkeep of his apartment. But with Emma in his life, things changed. He found himself learning how to cook, how to keep the apartment tidy, and how to truly appreciate the small, everyday moments that made up their life together. Emma, on the other hand, was beginning to let go of some of her past reservations. She had always been independent, taking care of herself and never expecting anyone to help her. But with Ethan, she found that she didn't have to do everything alone. He was there for her in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Their shared time was filled with laughter, love, and sometimes, even quiet moments of reflection. They would sit together on the couch, each with a book in hand, enjoying the stillness of the evening. Other times, they would go out, enjoying dinner at new restaurants or taking long walks in the park, as they had done early in their relationship. It wasn't the grand gestures that defined their bond. It was the little things, the way Ethan would make her coffee in the morning without being asked, or how Emma would leave little notes for him, reminding him to take breaks from his busy schedule. Yet, even in the midst of their growing closeness, challenges still arose. Ethan's work was always demanding, and there were days when he would come home late, his mind preoccupied with business matters. Emma could see the toll it was taking on him, and while she understood the pressure he was under, it didn't make the lonely nights any easier. One evening, after Ethan had returned home particularly late from an important business meeting, Emma sat down with him at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I know your work is important to you, but I feel like I'm losing you. I'm here, but sometimes I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Ethan sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the day. He looked at Emma, seeing the concern in her eyes, the vulnerability in her voice. It was a reminder of just how much she had come to mean to him. "I know," he said quietly, his voice laced with regret. "I've been so focused on everything else that I haven't been fully present for you. I'm sorry." Emma reached out, placing her hand over his. "I understand, Ethan. I do. But I need you to be here with me, too. I can't keep giving all of myself if I don't feel like you're truly here." Ethan felt the weight of her words. He had always prided himself on his ability to handle everything, to balance it all, but he realized that he couldn't keep running on empty. He needed to find a way to strike a better balance between his career and his relationship with Emma. "I don't want to lose you, Emma," he said earnestly. "I've been so wrapped up in work that I've neglected the one thing that truly matters. I promise you, I will do better. I'll find a way to make more time for us." Emma's eyes softened. "I don't want to be an afterthought, Ethan. I need to feel like I'm a priority too." Ethan nodded, his resolve strengthening. "You are a priority. You've always been a priority. I just lost sight of that for a while." Over the next few weeks, Ethan made an effort to be more present. He started blocking off time in his calendar for dinner with Emma, for walks, for moments where he could truly connect with her. He also took steps to delegate more of his responsibilities at work, trusting his team to handle tasks that had once been his sole responsibility. It wasn't easy. Letting go of control was something Ethan had struggled with for years, but he was learning to trust others, and most importantly, to trust himself. Emma noticed the changes in him, and with each small gesture, her confidence in their relationship grew. It wasn't about the grand promises or the perfect moments. It was about the consistency of Ethan showing up for her, day after day. As the months went on, they celebrated milestones together, moving into their new home, celebrating small victories in Ethan's business, and enjoying quiet weekends where they had nothing to do but be together. But life, as it always does, continued to throw challenges their way. One day, Ethan received an unexpected call from his company's board of directors. They had been discussing a potential merger, and Ethan was at the center of the negotiations. The pressure was mounting, and it became clear that the deal was going to take much more of his time and attention than he had anticipated. As the days stretched into weeks, Ethan found himself back at the office late into the night, his mind consumed with the intricacies of the deal. Emma, while supportive, began to feel the distance between them growing once more. She understood the importance of the merger, but she couldn't help feeling like she was losing him again. One evening, after Ethan had worked late yet again, Emma sat alone in their living room, feeling a familiar emptiness settle over her. She loved him, but she needed him to see that their relationship needed nurturing, too. She knew that both their dreams mattered, but they also needed to build a future where they could thrive together, not just apart. As she sat there in the quiet, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let their relationship fall apart. She loved Ethan too much to let that happen. And if it meant having a difficult conversation, then she was ready to have it. With a deep breath, she stood up and walked into the office, ready to speak her heart. Ethan looked up from his work, startled to see her standing there. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, concern in his voice. She walked toward him, sitting down beside him. "Ethan," she began, "I think we need to talk." Emma's words hung in the air, her voice steady but filled with the weight of everything she had been holding back. Ethan, sitting across from her, felt a tightness in his chest. For a moment, there was silence between them, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. He set down the papers he had been holding, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm listening," he said softly. Emma took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. "Ethan, I know we've been working through a lot together, and I'm proud of the progress we've made, but lately, I've been feeling like we're losing something important. You've been so focused on your work with the merger, and I understand it's crucial, but I need more from you. I need to feel like I matter. Not just when it's convenient for you, but all the time." Ethan's stomach tightened at her words. He had been so wrapped up in his work, trying to prove that he could handle everything on his own, that he hadn't noticed how much Emma was carrying. She wasn't asking for much, but she was asking for his presence, for his attention. "I know," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "I've been so consumed with the business that I haven't been giving you the attention you deserve. I've been neglecting you, and I'm sorry for that." Emma's eyes softened, but there was still a sadness there. "I just don't want us to lose what we've built. I don't want to feel like I'm the last priority in your life, Ethan. You've been putting everything into the merger, and while I support you, I can't help but feel left out. I need to know that I'm still important to you, that we're still important to you." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You are important to me, Emma. You're the most important thing in my life. I've been so focused on the future, on securing our future financially, that I've lost sight of the here and now. I've been doing it all wrong, and I know that now." Emma squeezed his hand in return. "I know you're trying, but I don't want to feel like an afterthought anymore. I want us to build a future together, but we can't do that if we're not both all in. I want us to be partners, in every sense of the word." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy with the realization that he had been blind to what really mattered. "I get it now. I've been so obsessed with my work that I forgot what truly matters. I promise you, I will do better. I want us to build something real, something lasting. And I can't do that if I'm not fully present." Emma's face softened, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I just need to know that we're in this together. Not just when things are easy, but when things are hard too." Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "I'm all in, Emma. You're right. I've been running on empty, and it's time I change that. I'll start putting us first, not just when I can, but all the time. I want to be here for you, to be the partner you deserve." Emma studied his face, searching for the sincerity in his eyes. She found it. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was willing to take this step with him. "I believe you, Ethan. But actions speak louder than words. We need to make this work, together." Ethan leaned forward, his voice earnest. "And we will. I promise." The weight of their conversation lingered in the room, but for the first time in a long time, Emma felt a shift inside her. Ethan was truly trying. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he spoke, in the way he reached for her hand. This was a turning point for both of them. They weren't just moving forward as a couple. They were committing to each other in a way that would require vulnerability, effort, and compromise. As the evening wore on, they spent the rest of the night talking about their fears, their hopes, and the future they wanted to build together. They both knew that it wouldn't be easy. They would face challenges, both personal and professional, but for the first time in their relationship, they felt like they were truly on the same page. Emma knew that she could no longer put her life on hold for the sake of a relationship that didn't prioritize her. But with Ethan, she felt like she could have both, the love and the partnership, the respect and the support. She was ready to build a future with him, but it had to be one where they were equal partners, not just in business, but in life. Ethan, for his part, understood that his work couldn't be the only thing that defined him. He had spent so long focused on his career that he had forgotten what really mattered. Now, with Emma, he realized that life wasn't about the number of deals he closed or the size of his bank account. It was about the people he loved and the connections he had. And he wasn't going to let the opportunity to build something real slip away. As the night ended, they shared a quiet moment, sitting side by side, knowing that they were both on the cusp of something new. They didn't have all the answers, but they were willing to find them together. It was a new beginning for both of them, a chance to move forward, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came their way. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt hopeful. He wasn't sure where the journey would take them, but he knew one thing for sure. They were in this together, and that was enough. The weeks following their conversation marked a turning point for both Ethan and Emma. They had faced a challenging moment in their relationship, but the openness and honesty that followed created a new foundation for them. They began to understand each other better, not just in the context of their individual needs, but as a couple who was learning how to thrive together. Ethan made a conscious effort to balance his work and his relationship, and although it was difficult at times, he was more present than ever before. He began to incorporate small habits into his routine to make sure he didn't lose sight of Emma or their connection. He would put away his phone during dinner, dedicate entire weekends to exploring new places together, and ensure that the time they spent at home was undisturbed by work. Emma, in turn, saw the effort Ethan was putting into their relationship. She was still cautious, but no longer hesitant to trust. She knew that this was a crucial time in their relationship, and she appreciated that Ethan was showing up for her. The love they shared felt more genuine, more balanced than it had before. One afternoon, as Ethan took a break from his work to meet Emma for lunch, they sat together at a cafe, their conversation light, yet filled with an underlying sense of contentment. Emma looked across the table at Ethan, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady but thoughtful, "about everything we've talked about, the changes we've been making." Ethan set down his glass of water, giving her his full attention. "What about it?" he asked, his tone encouraging. "I think we're finally getting it right," she said with a sigh of relief. "We've been through a lot, but now I feel like we're moving forward in a way that feels real. You're here with me, and I'm here with you. And for the first time, I'm not afraid to believe that this can work, that we can make it work." Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. "I feel the same way, Emma. I think we've both been through a lot individually, but together, we've managed to navigate through it all, and we're better for it. You've made me realize how much I've neglected what truly matters. This relationship, it's what matters most to me now." Emma reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. "I'm glad we're here," she said softly. "I never thought I'd be this vulnerable with anyone. But with you, it feels natural. And that's a huge deal for me." Ethan squeezed her hand, his voice low. "You've shown me what real love looks like. It's not about the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It's about the quiet, everyday moments, the way you laugh, the way you listen, the way you make me feel like I'm enough just as I am." They sat in comfortable silence, their connection palpable. It was in the way they looked at each other, the way their hands fit together. They both knew there was still work ahead, but they were ready for it. They were committed to making their relationship a priority. Over the following months, Ethan and Emma continued to grow closer. They faced challenges, but they faced them as a team. There were moments of doubt, moments when the pressures of their individual lives tried to pull them apart, but each time, they chose to stand together. They learned to communicate more openly, to support each other in ways they had never experienced before. For Emma, this was a revelation. She had always been the one to take care of herself, to shield her heart from being hurt. But with Ethan, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, and in doing so, she realized that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. Ethan, too, learned a great deal from Emma. He had spent so much of his life focused on work and success, but he now understood that true success wasn't measured by money or accolades. It was measured by the relationships you built, by the love you gave and received. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their shared apartment, watching the sunset, Ethan turned to Emma. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "about what comes next for us. We've both changed, we've both grown, and I want us to keep growing together." Emma met his gaze, her eyes full of curiosity and warmth. "What do you mean?" she asked. Ethan smiled, his heart filled with a quiet certainty. "I want us to take the next step. I know we've talked about it before, but I'm serious. I want us to make a bigger commitment to each other. Not just in words, but in actions. I want us to build something together, something lasting." Emma's heart skipped a beat, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt. But all she saw was love, and it was enough. She reached out to take his hand. "I'm ready for that too," she said, her voice steady. "We've come so far already, and I know there's so much more we can do Together. Ethan leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was both soft and sure. When they pulled away, he looked at her with a smile that spoke volumes. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. Emma smiled back, her heart full of hope. She had found something she never thought was possible: love, trust, and partnership. And she knew, deep in her soul, that this was the beginning of a new chapter for them both. Together, they would face whatever came next. They were ready, and as they stood together, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear over the horizon, they both knew that the future was full of endless possibilities, as long as they faced it side by side. The next few months were a whirlwind of growth and new experiences for Ethan and Emma. They had spent countless hours together, building their lives, learning about each other's strengths and weaknesses, and finding ways to compromise. There was a quiet peace between them, a knowing that whatever happened, they would face it together. Ethan's commitment to Emma remained unwavering. He made sure that work no longer dominated his life the way it once had. Every morning, he set aside time to spend with her before heading into his office. They would have breakfast together, talk about their day ahead, and share small moments of joy that made the day feel more manageable. At work, Ethan had begun delegating more to his team, trusting them to carry out the tasks that he once felt solely responsible for. He had realized that success wasn't just about doing everything himself. It was about building a team that could work together to achieve their goals. He felt the weight of his decisions lighten as he found a balance between his career and his personal life. And most importantly, he found himself becoming the partner Emma deserved. For Emma, things had changed, too. She had always been independent, but as she allowed herself to trust Ethan more, she began to open up in ways she hadn't before. She started pursuing things that were just for her, like painting, something she had neglected for years. Ethan supported her in these pursuits, never pressuring her to give up anything for the sake of their relationship. Instead, he encouraged her to keep doing what made her happy. It wasn't about being with someone who needed fixing. It was about finding someone who could appreciate and support the person she already was. It was a balance of give and take, and they were learning to make it work. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, the quiet hum of the city outside their window, Emma turned to Ethan. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice calm but filled with something new. Ethan looked up from his book, sensing the shift in her tone. "About what?" he asked, setting his book aside and giving her his full attention. Emma smiled, her eyes soft. "About us. How far we've come. I just want to say that I'm proud of us, of what we've built." Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm proud of us too," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Emma nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I never imagined I could have this, someone who truly understands me, supports me. And I didn't think I could be this vulnerable with anyone. But with you, it's different. You make it feel safe to trust again." Ethan's heart swelled at her words. He knew that it hadn't been easy for her to open up, and he had always respected her boundaries. But hearing her say this, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, made him feel like they had truly built something real. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "I'm here, Emma. Always." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling between them. They had both been through so much individually, and now they were learning how to navigate the world together, side by side. As they continued to grow, so did their relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they were building something that felt like it could last forever. But even in the midst of their growing connection, Ethan knew there were still things he needed to address. His family, the expectations they placed on him, the fear that they wouldn't understand his choices. One day, after work, Ethan made the decision to visit his parents. It was something he had been putting off, knowing that their reaction to his relationship with Emma might not be easy to handle. But he knew it was time to face it. As he sat in his parents' living room, the familiar tension in the air, Ethan knew that the conversation he was about to have would be difficult. His mother was the first to speak. "Ethan," she said, her voice laced with concern, "we need to talk about your future. About this woman you're seeing." Ethan clenched his jaw but kept his composure. "Mom, I know you have concerns. But this is who I am with now. And I want you to understand that Emma is important to me. She's more than just someone I'm seeing." His mother didn't look convinced. "But Ethan, you've worked so hard to get to where you are. You've built a life. I just don't understand why you'd choose someone who doesn't come from the same background. She's not part of our world. Ethan's patience thinned, but he remained calm. She's more than the life she was born into. She's strong, intelligent, and caring. She's made me a better person, and that's what matters. I'm choosing her because I want to. I'm choosing to live my life authentically, even if it doesn't meet your expectations. His mother's eyes narrowed, but there was a hint of sadness in them as well. I just want what's best for you, Ethan. I've always wanted that. Ethan stood up, his resolve firm. I know you do, but I can't keep living my life based on your expectations. I have to live for me, for the future that Emma and I are building together. The room fell silent as his mother absorbed his words. Ethan didn't expect her to change her mind right away, but he needed her to understand that this was his life. He wasn't asking for her approval, just her understanding. As he left their house later that evening, Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had done what he needed to do. He had spoken his truth. He was no longer afraid to live authentically, to choose his own happiness. And when he arrived home that evening, Emma was waiting for him. She could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes seemed a little tired. How did it go? She asked softly. Ethan smiled, pulling her into his arms. It wasn't easy, but I told them the truth. And I'm ready to keep moving forward, no matter what. Emma hugged him tightly, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but feeling more certain than ever that they were on the right path. Together, as weeks went by, Ethan and Emma continued to strengthen their relationship, each day filled with new lessons, challenges, and a deepening understanding of one another. After Ethan's conversation with his parents, he noticed a shift. It wasn't an immediate change, but the tension in his chest that he had carried for so long started to ease. He had taken a huge step by standing firm in his choices, and while his mother still had reservations, there was a subtle acceptance in the air. Emma had been his rock during that difficult conversation, and he couldn't help but be grateful for her unwavering support. They were learning that the most important part of a relationship wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up for each other, day after day. They had begun to realize that, while the future was unknown, they were ready to face it together. One afternoon, Emma came home with a surprise for Ethan. She had been thinking about how they had both evolved over the past year, how their lives had become intertwined in ways they hadn't imagined. She had always loved painting, and while she hadn't shared it with Ethan at first, she had started to rediscover her passion. One of the things she had always dreamed of doing was having a small exhibition of her work. It had always been a private dream, one she hadn't voiced to anyone, but now, with Ethan by her side, she felt that maybe it was time to take that step. She walked into their apartment, carrying a small envelope in her hand. Ethan looked up from his laptop, smiling. "Hey, what's this?" he asked, curiosity in his eyes. Emma handed him the envelope. "Open it," she said, her voice a little shy. Ethan opened it to reveal a flyer for an art show. His eyes widened as he looked at her. "An art show?" he asked. Emma nodded, her cheeks flushing. "I've been working on this for a while. I didn't want to tell you until it was official, but I'm going to be showcasing my paintings." Ethan was speechless for a moment, his heart swelling with pride for her. "Emma, that's amazing. I had no idea you were even thinking about this. I'm so proud of you." Emma smiled softly, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "I wasn't sure if it was the right time, but with you here, I feel like I can do it. I want to share this with you, with everyone. But I'm also scared." Ethan reached out, taking her hands in his. "You don't have to be scared. This is your dream, Emma. And I'm here, no matter what. I'll be there to support you every step of the way." Emma felt a rush of gratitude, her fears beginning to melt away. Ethan had always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. She had always kept her dreams close to her chest, worried that they might be dismissed, but now, she felt ready to take the next step. "I'm glad I have you in my corner," she said, her voice soft. "You make me feel like I can do anything." Ethan smiled, his gaze never leaving hers. "You can do anything, Emma. I know you can." The day of the art show arrived, and Emma's nerves were at an all-time high. She had spent the past few weeks preparing, selecting her best pieces, and trying to calm her fears. But when the day finally came, she was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Ethan was by her side, as he had promised, supporting her every step of the way. They arrived at the gallery, and Emma's heart raced as she walked into the space that would showcase her work. The walls were lined with her paintings, each one telling a story, each one representing a part of her journey. Ethan stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, as they took in the scene. "These are incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. Emma looked at the paintings, her heart swelling with pride. She had poured so much of herself into these pieces, and seeing them displayed like this was more than she had ever imagined. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. Ethan smiled, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "It's happening because you believed in yourself. You made it happen." The guests began to arrive, and Emma found herself talking to people she had never met, explaining the stories behind her paintings. It was a surreal experience, one that made her realize how far she had come. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was an artist, someone who had worked hard to make her dreams a reality. Throughout the evening, Ethan stood by her side, never leaving her for long. He was her rock, the one person who had always believed in her. As the night wore on, more and more people admired her work, and Emma began to feel a sense of accomplishment that she had never experienced before. She had done it. She had faced her fears, shared her art with the world, and found acceptance in ways she had never imagined. When the show finally came to an end, Ethan turned to her, his smile wide. "You did it, Emma. I'm so proud of you." Emma's eyes glistened with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan kissed her gently on the forehead. "You didn't need me to do it. You did it all on your own. I'm just happy I got to be a part of it." Emma's heart felt full, and as they stood together, looking at her artwork, she realized just how much she had changed. She had gone from hiding her dreams to sharing them with the world, and it was all because she had trusted herself and trusted Ethan. Together, they had built something beautiful, something that was just beginning to unfold. The days following Emma's art show were filled with a sense of fulfillment that neither she nor Ethan had expected. For Emma, it wasn't just about the success of the show. It was about overcoming her fears, sharing a part of herself with the world, and realizing that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Ethan, watching her flourish, couldn't help but feel a deep pride in her. Her courage had inspired him to push beyond his own boundaries, to do more than just exist in his world of business. He had learned to prioritize the people who truly mattered, and Emma was at the top of that list. As they continued to navigate their life together, their bond grew even stronger. But not everything was as seamless as it seemed. Even as their personal lives flourished, the weight of the decisions they had made, especially with Ethan's business, started to show cracks. The merger that had occupied so much of Ethan's time and energy was now reaching its final stages. Although he had found a balance, the pressure of managing the final steps of such a huge deal was still heavy on his shoulders. He found himself back at his office late into the night, reviewing contracts, meeting with stakeholders, and attending endless calls. Emma, while understanding of the demands of his work, couldn't ignore the growing tension between them. She saw the signs: Ethan's exhaustion, the way he was pulling away, both physically and emotionally. She had been in relationships before where the other person's career took precedence, and she wasn't willing to go down that path again. It was not just about the long hours. It was about the emotional distance that was slowly creeping in. She wanted to talk to him about it, but didn't want to add more stress to his already overwhelming workload. But as days passed, she realized that this wasn't something they could ignore. One evening, after Ethan had returned home later than usual, Emma decided to address the elephant in the room. She waited for him to sit down, her heart beating fast as she prepared to speak her mind. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady but filled with concern. Ethan, looking weary, glanced at her with a soft sigh. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked, attempting to shift the conversation toward something lighter. But Emma, sensing his avoidance, shook her head gently. "I need to talk to you about something. Something important." Ethan's brow furrowed, his tiredness apparent. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting his things down. Emma took a deep breath. "It's about us. About what's been going on lately. I see how hard you're working, and I appreciate everything you're doing. But I also see how distant you've become. I don't just mean physically, but emotionally too. And I need to know if we're still a priority for you, or if this business deal is taking over everything." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't realized how much he had been withdrawing from her. He had been so focused on the merger, thinking that securing their future financially would be the right thing to do. But now, sitting across from Emma, He saw the toll it had taken on her and on their relationship. "I didn't mean for it to be like this," he said, his voice softening. "I've just been so focused on making sure everything goes well with the merger. I thought if I just pushed through, it would all be worth it in the end. But I've lost sight of what's truly important, what really matters." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand the pressure you're under. I get that your career is important, but it's not just about the money or the business. It's about us, Ethan. About the life we're trying to build together. I don't want to feel like I'm secondary or that my needs and feelings don't matter because of a business deal. I want us to be a team, not just in the good times, but through the tough ones too." Ethan took her hands in his, looking into her eyes with a mixture of regret and sincerity. "I'm sorry. You're right. I've let the business consume me, and I've neglected you. You deserve so much more than that." Emma felt the tension in her chest begin to ease as she heard his words. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and she knew he was trying. "I don't want to be the person who's always asking for more," she said softly. "But I also don't want to lose what we have. I need to know that we can have a future where we both feel supported, where you don't have to sacrifice everything for the sake of your career. Because, truthfully, I don't want that kind of life for us." Ethan's heart sank as he realized just how much his actions had affected her. "I've been so wrong," he whispered. "I've been so focused on making sure we're financially secure that I've forgotten what truly makes a life worth living. And that's you. It's us." Emma squeezed his hands, her voice tender. "I don't need everything to be perfect. I just need you to be present, Ethan. I need to know that we're in this together, not just when things are going well, but when things are hard too." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the conversation settle in. "I promise I'll do better. I've been so caught up in trying to provide for us that I've lost sight of what really matters. But I won't let that happen again. You and our future together will always come first from now on." Emma smiled, the relief evident in her eyes. "I believe you, Ethan, and I'm willing to move forward with you, as long as we keep working on this together." Ethan kissed her hand, his heart full of gratitude. "We will. I won't let you down again." And as they sat there together, both of them knew that this moment, this conversation, marked a new chapter in their lives. They had faced the challenges head-on, learned from them, and come out stronger. The road ahead might not always be easy, but together, they knew they could face anything. After their conversation, Ethan and Emma began to rebuild the rhythm of their lives, but now with a deeper understanding of each other's needs and the recognition of the importance of balance. Ethan kept his promise to be more present, carving out time for their relationship despite the demanding pressures of his work. He didn't want to make the same mistake again, letting work overshadow the life they were building together. The merger had been finalized, and with it, a new chapter began for both him and his company. Ethan had delegated more responsibilities to his trusted team, and he now found himself able to step back and focus more on the personal side of his life. Emma, too, found herself thriving in this new phase of their relationship. As they both grew together, they realized that their individual successes only added to the strength of their partnership. They continued to pursue their passions, whether it was Emma's painting or Ethan's expanding company, but it never came at the expense of their time together. They had learned how to prioritize one another without sacrificing their dreams. One evening, a few months after their heartfelt conversation, Ethan invited Emma to a quiet dinner at a restaurant he had been wanting to try. It was a small, intimate place, with soft lighting and the sound of a live jazz band playing in the background. As they sat down to eat, the atmosphere felt perfect. Ethan looked at Emma, his eyes filled with affection. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his voice sincere. "About how much we've changed, how much we've grown." Emma smiled, her heart full. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said, her voice soft. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Ethan nodded. "I feel like we've built something so real, something I never expected to find. But I also know that we're just getting started. There's still so much more to explore, to experience, to learn about each other." Emma's smile widened. "I'm excited for that," she said. "I'm excited about everything we're going to do together." They spent the evening talking about their future, the trips they wanted to take, the goals they hoped to achieve, and the life they envisioned. It was in these moments, these quiet exchanges, that Ethan realized he had never felt more certain about anything in his life. He had always been a man driven by external achievements, business, wealth, status. But now, with Emma by his side, he knew that the true measure of success wasn't in what he owned or accomplished, but in the love he shared and the way he was able to build a life with someone he cherished. As the night came to a close, they walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, the night air cool against their skin. It felt like a perfect evening, one that marked a milestone in their journey together. They had weathered challenges, but now, they were both in a place where they could truly appreciate the beauty of what they had created. When they got home, they took a moment to sit on the balcony and enjoy the view of the city. "I'm so proud of us," Ethan said, his voice calm, looking out at the lights of the city. "We've worked so hard, but we've built something that's worth more than anything I've ever achieved in business." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. "I'm proud of us too," she said softly. "We've come so far and we've done it together." Ethan turned to look at her, his hand gently cupping her face. "Together," he repeated, his voice filled with meaning. They shared a quiet moment, content in the presence of the other. They both knew that life would continue to present challenges, but they had learned that the key to overcoming them was to face them together. In the weeks that followed, they continued to grow, both as individuals and as a couple. They made plans for the future, always communicating openly, always prioritizing their relationship. Emma's art began to flourish even more as she started to host small private exhibitions, gaining recognition in the local art community. Ethan, while still committed to his work, found a new balance, making sure that the time he spent at work didn't take away from the time he spent with Emma. They celebrated their small victories together, whether it was Emma selling a painting or Ethan landing a new deal. But for them, success wasn't just about achievements. It was about the quiet moments, the way they could be there for each other through everything. One weekend, they took a spontaneous trip to a quiet lakeside town, just to escape for a few days. The trip was simple but perfect. They spent the days hiking, exploring the town, and spending time by the water. One evening, as they sat together by the lake, watching the sunset, Emma turned to Ethan. "This is what I've always wanted," she said, her voice full of emotion. "To have someone by my side, someone who supports me, who shares the quiet moments with me. I never imagined I could have this." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "I feel the same way," he said. "And I promise, I'm going to keep working to make sure that we always have moments like this." As they watched the sky turn from pink to orange, the weight of everything they had been through together settled into a peaceful knowing. They had found something real, something rare. And as they faced the future together, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The road ahead wasn't always clear, but with each other, they were ready to take it on, knowing that the love they shared was more than enough to carry them through. As the days turned into months, Ethan and Emma continued to build a life together that felt more real and more fulfilling with every passing day. They had been through their ups and downs, but the bond between them had only deepened. Ethan had learned how to prioritize his personal life, and Emma, who had once kept her heart guarded, had come to trust him fully. They were now more than just partners in a relationship. They were a team, learning and growing together. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments when the weight of their individual responsibilities threatened to pull them apart. Ethan's company was expanding, and while he had learned to delegate more, there were still challenges that required his full attention. Emma's art career, too, was picking up momentum, and she was juggling private commissions with her exhibitions. But what had changed was their approach to these challenges. They no longer viewed them as obstacles, but as opportunities to support each other. One afternoon, after a particularly long week for both of them, they decided to take a short trip to a nearby vineyard. It wasn't far from the city, but it felt like a different world entirely. The rolling hills and the quiet, peaceful landscape provided a much-needed escape from the pressures of their daily lives. They arrived in the early afternoon, and after checking into a charming little cottage on the property, they headed out to explore. The vineyard was beautiful, with rows of grapevines stretching as far as the eye could see. Ethan had never been much of a wine enthusiast, but with Emma by his side, he was eager to learn. They took a tour of the vineyard, tasting different varieties of wine along the way, laughing and enjoying each other's company. "I'm glad we did this," Emma said as they sat on a bench overlooking the vineyard, the sun beginning to set in the distance. "It's nice to slow down and just enjoy the moment." Ethan nodded, taking a sip of his wine. I feel the same way. We've been so focused on everything else that it's easy to forget what really matters. Emma smiled, her eyes softening as she looked at him. You've really changed, Ethan. I've seen the way you've been making time for us, even with everything going on with your work. Ethan sighed, leaning back against the bench. I had to change. I realized that no matter how much success I achieve, it's never going to mean anything if I don't have someone to share it with. And I want to share it with you, Emma. You're my priority now. Emma's heart swelled at his words. She had never thought she could have someone who truly understood her, who valued her not just for what she brought to the table, but for who she was. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. I feel the same way. We've come so far, and we've built something beautiful. I never thought I'd be in a relationship like this, one that feels so real. Ethan smiled, his thumb gently rubbing the back of her hand. You've shown me what real love looks like. It's not about the grand gestures or the material things. It's about being there for each other, even in the small moments. Even when life gets complicated. They sat in silence for a moment, just taking in the scenery, the soft rustling of the wind through the trees, and the sound of birds in the distance. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt the weight of the world pressing down on them. They had learned to embrace the peace in the quiet moments, to find joy in the simplicity of life. As the evening wore on, they had dinner at the Vineyards restaurant, enjoying fresh, local food paired with wines they had learned about earlier in the day. The meal was delicious, and the atmosphere was intimate. As they finished their dinner, Ethan turned to Emma, his eyes filled with a new kind of certainty. I've been thinking a lot about the future, he said, his voice softer now. About what comes next for us. Emma looked at him, her expression gentle. What do you mean? She asked, sensing the seriousness in his tone. Ethan smiled, taking her hand across the table. I mean that I want to continue building this life with you. I want to keep learning, growing, and experiencing new things together. And I want to make sure we're always working toward a future where we can both be happy, together. Emma's heart fluttered. She had never felt more sure of anything in her life. I want that too, she replied. I've never felt more at home than I do with you. And I know we have so much more to experience together. They sat there for a while longer, the soft hum of conversation around them, the warmth of the evening, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it hand in hand. After their trip, as they returned to their daily routines, Ethan and Emma found that their relationship had reached a new level of intimacy and understanding. They still had their challenges, but they faced them together, supporting one another and communicating openly. The love they shared was no longer just about romance. It was about mutual respect, shared dreams, and a commitment to building a future where both of them could thrive. They continued to pursue their passions, Ethan with his growing company, Emma with her art, and they were always there to cheer each other on. Their love had become a foundation, something unshakable, that allowed them to face whatever the world threw at them. They had found the balance they had both been searching for, and in doing so, they had created a life that was more fulfilling than either of them had ever imagined. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was real, and together, they were ready to take on whatever came next, knowing that they had each other to lean on. As the months continued to pass, Ethan and Emma found themselves at a place of true contentment. They had worked through their challenges, grown as individuals, and built a strong foundation for their future together. The commitment they had to each other was no longer just about love. It was about trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Their lives, once so different, had merged in a way that was more fulfilling than either of them had ever imagined. Ethan had learned to balance his career with his personal life, delegating more responsibilities and allowing himself to focus on the things that mattered most, like Emma and their future. He had come to understand that success was not just about wealth or status. It was about the people you loved and the impact you had on their lives. He found peace in the small moments they shared, whether it was a quiet evening at home, a spontaneous weekend getaway, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. Emma, too, had found her place in the world, both as an artist and as Ethan's partner. Her art had continued to flourish, gaining recognition and earning her the respect she had always deserved. But it was her relationship with Ethan that had brought her the most joy. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully embrace her dreams, knowing that Ethan would always be there to support her. Together, they had created a life that felt balanced and fulfilling. They had made their relationship a priority, and in doing so, they had built something that was stronger than either of them had anticipated. As they sat together one evening on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, they reflected on how far they had come. Ethan turned to Emma, his expression soft but filled with sincerity. "I never thought I'd be here, you know," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I've spent so much of my life chasing success, and I didn't even realize what I was missing. But with you, I found something so much more important. You've taught me what really matters." Emma smiled, her heart full as she leaned into him. "I feel the same way. I never imagined that I could have a love like this, one that makes me feel so complete. You've shown me that it's okay to trust, to open my heart again, and I'm so grateful for that." Ethan kissed her gently on the forehead, a gesture that spoke volumes. "You've made me a better man, Emma, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know that you're my priority." Emma wrapped her arms around him, holding him close. "And I'll spend the rest of my life loving you for exactly who you are." They sat in silence for a while, watching the world go by. It was a peaceful moment, one where the weight of everything they had built together seemed to settle into something solid and real. They knew that challenges would still come their way. Life had a way of throwing unexpected obstacles in your path. But now, they were stronger, more united than ever before. Together, they knew they could face anything. As they looked toward the future, they felt a sense of anticipation. They had so much more to explore together, places to visit, dreams to chase, and a lifetime of memories to create. And with each passing day, their love grew deeper. It wasn't just about the big moments. It was about the everyday acts of kindness, the quiet support, and the love that continued to build between them. The future seemed full of promise, and Ethan and Emma were ready to take it on, hand in hand. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. A love built on trust, mutual respect, and the simple but powerful realization that together, they were unstoppable. And as the night drew to a close, with the stars twinkling above them, Ethan and Emma knew that the best was yet to come. In this captivating tale, follow the journey of a millionaire who unexpectedly finds love in the most unlikely place. This heartwarming story explores themes of personal growth, vulnerability, and the power of love in millionaire stories. As the protagonist works through his struggles, he learns that true success isn't just about wealth. It's about the relationships you build and the people who stand by you. From overcoming past mistakes to finding a love that changes everything, this story offers a deep dive into what it truly means to find happiness, even for a millionaire. Along the way, he faces challenges that test both his career and his relationship, but in the end, it's the love he shares with his partner that becomes his greatest achievement. If you're a fan of millionaire stories that explore the complexities of love, success, and redemption, this journey will surely captivate you. Through their shared experiences, they prove that love and trust can heal even the deepest wounds. With every twist and turn, the story brings forth the idea that no matter how much money you have, it's the people around you that truly matter. Discover how. In the world of millionaire stories, success takes on a whole new meaning when you have someone by your side to share it with. The journey of self-discovery, love, and partnership is one that will resonate with anyone who has ever believed that true wealth comes from the heart.